Ryan Higgins.
All right, rolling along here on this Wednesday in the Q's. Talked a little hoops there, but time to get back to the football as we're now, we've made it 24 hours. We're 24 hours and like 20 minutes into the Fran Brown era. Has anything happened yet? I don't know. But a brave new world we have entered, and with that we go back to our next guest. She is Andrea Adelson, one of the great ACC and college football reporters for ESPN. Andrea, welcome in. Thanks as always, and wild times up here in the Q. So what are your initial reactions when you heard that Syracuse was hiring Fran Brown?
Well, quite honestly, my initial reaction was it felt a little bit outside the box. You know, the last time Syracuse made a head coaching hire, they were able to get a head coach that had previous head coaching experience in Dino Babers. And so I thought that might be something that Syracuse would be interested in trying to get once again. The fact that Fran Brown hasn't been a coordinator and hasn't been a head coach makes it, to me, a little bit of an outside-the-box hire. But I understand why John Wildhack made this decision, because when you're looking at recruiting to Syracuse and trying to build a roster, you want to try and own your region. And based on the results that Fran Brown has had in that region, then he checks off like 60 different boxes, right? And at a program like Syracuse, you really need to rely heavily on recruiting in addition to what you can do through the transfer portal. So I think there might be a little bit of a learning curve, at least initially, when he comes in there, having not been a head coach or coordinator before. But I'm really fascinated and interested to see what he does from a recruiting aspect to build back this Syracuse roster.
Yeah, you know, I've said it all along here, Andrea. Like, we had this whole list of names and all of this. Like, Monday morning, this Fran Brown stuff started percolating. I'm like, who is this guy? I've never even heard of this guy before. So we're kind of in scramble mode trying to learn about him. And you know, when somebody gets hired for a job like this, everybody says all the right things and they say nice things. But you know, it's been coming from all around the college football world. Like that caught me off guard a bit, which I guess is why you hire a guy like this, right? Like, it seems like he is well respected in the college football community.
Yeah, you're right. And the statements have been all positive, but from everywhere. And I think that just speaks to the impression that he's left on people, but also the job he's done with recruiting. I believe he's ranked right now the #1 recruiter in the country. And if you're a really good recruiter, generally speaking, you have really good people skills and you make a good impression on everybody that you come across, right? Or else why would people want to come and play for you? So I think that goes hand in hand with having the types of communication and people skills that are required to be a head coach. And as much as I respected the heck out of Dino Babers and had a great relationship with Dino, I know oftentimes he didn't really like to be out there shaking hands and talking to the media in depth. And so I think from the perspective of bringing in Fran Brown, perhaps he has an opportunity with the recruiting skills to be able to go in there and maybe shake some more hands in the community, be more active in the community to try and build back some of the optimism that has been lost with Syracuse football.
Yeah, well, what do you think, I'll take this from both perspectives, but from Fran's perspective, what do you think his biggest challenge with this job will be?
Well, I think there's a few of them, and I mentioned this, I think today on ESPN.com. My colleague Adam Rittenberg and I just combined to say, who's Fran Brown, kind of what's the biggest challenge. I think NIL and figuring that out is a huge challenge, quite honestly. And I know Dino talked a lot about this during his time at Syracuse, and before he left, I had conversations with him about this. Similar conversations, quite frankly, to Dave Clawson at Wake Forest, who has seen some really good players leave his roster because they couldn't compete with NIL. Mm-hmm. And it happened at Syracuse, maybe not to the extent of a Sam Hartman, but it did. And there were never really opportunities to use NIL to bring guys into Syracuse, to have them transfer into Syracuse, or to really retain the types of guys that went on to programs like an Ohio State or an LSU. So I think that's first and foremost. The fact that he comes from Georgia, which has a really good NIL apparatus, I think is good because he understands what it takes to get that. And with his recruiting and people skills, you can kind of start the fundraising efforts to get people more invested in what the NIL is going to look like. I think the second part of it, and he mentioned this, I think, in his statement was trying to bring in an elite coaching staff. It's very difficult to bring in an elite coaching staff when you don't have an elite salary pool. Mm-hmm. So that's one area right there that I would look at. But it's not just bringing in the staff, it's retaining the staff. And Dino lost a bunch of assistants over the course of his career at Syracuse because they couldn't retain them because the money was better elsewhere. And I had conversations with him years ago about that. So to me, it's what is NIL and retaining assistants all about? Money. And so I think that right there, to me, are two challenges that I kind of identify going into this job and seeing if the investment is going to be there to get Syracuse to a place where they can compete, not just in the ACC for recruits and transfer guys, but nationally.
Andrea Adelson, ESPN, ACC, and college football reporter is with us. We're talking about the official hiring a little more than 24 hours ago. Syracuse hiring Fran Brown to be its next football head coach. And, you know, I said it, Andrea, like the biggest thing that's going to coming up is I think the most important position he's going to fill based on his, background and all this stuff is the offensive coordinator. How important do you think that decision is? Because I feel most times you hire a coach, whether or not the assistants, you know what the football is going to be. Like with Fran, I got no idea what the football is going to be based on this guy coming in.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I also think bringing in either a coordinator or assistants who have head coaching experience somewhere down the line could obviously be beneficial for him as he makes this transition now to be a head coach and have all these decisions that he has to make that he's never had to make before. And I'm not just talking about like top level decisions. Everything comes to the head coach's desk. So in my view, hiring a staff around you that can help alleviate some of that load, who've been there before, who've been at Power 5 schools before and understand that dynamic and what that looks like, is going to be invaluable. Now, who that's going to be, I don't know what his tree looks like in terms of who he has connections with, because oftentimes that's how the hiring works, is people you worked with before or your friend of a friend knows somebody. I don't know what that's going to look like, and I don't know what that's going to look like because I also don't know much about Fran Brown. Never spoken to him before. So I would be guessing right now. But I think trying to make sure that you are being innovative on offense, in my view, is going to be hugely important for what he's going to be bringing to the table at Syracuse.
I find it interesting, too, here. The portal is opening up officially in less than a week on Monday. I just said a little bit ago, Andrea, I feel like we're going to get a pretty good initial sense of, like, all right, how big are these recruiting chops, right, with how we see him attack the portal here next week?
Yeah, and the thing is about the portal, though, there's a lot of guys that are already in there who know where they're going to end up going. Yeah. And a lot of that is based on money, right, and NIL. I mean, we heard Matt Rule today. I don't know if you heard the sound, the Nebraska coach, talking about how the going rate right now for a transfer quarterback in the portal is $1 million to $1.5 million. Whoa. And I've heard whispers of that among coaches, but never publicly. Matt Rule's the first coach to publicly come out there and say, hey, this is what the market looks like. Is Syracuse able to match that or to do something anywhere near that?
No is the answer.
Right, which is why I keep on harping on the NIL, because if that's what the market is for a top-tier quarterback, you have to know how to play that game. You have to know that that's how these things are working. And I have a feeling that Dino Babers knew exactly what that market looked like. And some of these other coaches, I mean, how much do you think Sam Hartman got to go to Notre Dame? Let's not sit here and pretend that, he just went because he wanted to go to Notre Dame. Let's be honest about the situation here. So the fact that that is now out there and people can kind of have an idea of, oh, my gosh, is that what the market looks like? So that's why I feel like the portal a lot of times, what can a coach do in the portal? I think there's some instances and situations where you can show off your recruiting chops to a guy and to get him to come to your school, maybe over another school that people may think, hey, he should be going there. Ultimately, though, for a lot of the top-tier talent, it comes down to what is the NIL going to look like. And that's why I keep harping on it. I know I sound like a broken record here, but based on a lot of the transfers and where they've ended up over the last few years, NIL has been a huge factor in that.
Yeah, and hey, we see Riley Leonard, Duke's quarterback, is in the portal now with a do not contact, and Notre Dame has an open quarterback spot. I don't think any of that is a very large coincidence right now.
No.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. So I do want to ask you this, too, because it is interesting, within the scope of the ACC and going forward, that Duke has also come open at the same time as Syracuse. When we compare Syracuse to Duke, two private institutions in the ACC, where in your mind, Andrea, is Duke in terms of resources compared to Syracuse?
So I think Duke has a much better NIL setup right now because of basketball. They have had that thing rolling from the beginning, and because of that, football is able to benefit. I honestly feel like Syracuse and Wake Forest are more comparable based on what the NIL structures look like right now. I think Duke has a little bit more going for it compared to those two programs. They're very obviously three private schools that are, not the Florida States of the world, but have to find different ways to be able to build their roster, develop their players to be able to compete in the ACC. Duke had some NIL apparatus working for it, and Mike Elko in 2 years did a phenomenal job getting a lot of upgrades to their facility and other things to help out the football players that weren't there. I know Syracuse has done the same in terms of the upgrades they've made with their facility. And Wake Forest has poured millions of dollars in upgrading their facilities as well. I mean, Wake Forest facilities are terrific, top of the line. But right now, do players care about those facilities, or they care about what the NIL apparatus looks like? And so I think that's where Duke probably has an advantage over Wake Forest and Syracuse.
Yeah, I think the first time I saw a game at Wake, it was 06, 07, somewhere in there. My goodness, the difference in the last 15 years, you wouldn't recognize it. It's unbelievable what they've done down there in the last decade or so. Have you? I'm also interested in the idea. Two similar-ish teams in the league hiring coaches at the same time. Obviously, Duke is a way newer to this process, given when Elko just left. Are you hearing anything about the type of coach they might be going after right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know that there's some folks in the Duke community who would like the offensive coordinator, Kevin Johns, to be promoted to be the head coach. I think the players probably would like that because you can kind of keep everything moving forward with what Mike Elko established. And, offensively, even when they lost Riley Leonard, to be able to finish the season the way that they did with their third-string quarterback, that's a direct compliment to Kevin Johns and the job that, he has done with that offense. But, another name I've heard is Curt Cignetti at James Madison. Mm-hmm. A program builder over there, understands what it's like to win at a program that's maybe a little bit under the radar in your state, the way that James Madison has been in making that transition to the FBS level. But the job that he has done this year with James Madison has been phenomenal. If I was Nina King, that's somebody that I'd be looking at. And then there's some, top-tier coordinators maybe that they would take a look at. So I think ultimately it's going to come down to, do you want to hire another coordinator like a Mike Elko, whose star is on the rise, who may only be there for a couple of years, and then when the next job comes open that's in a bigger conference, leaves? Or do you want to try and hire somebody maybe towards the later stages of their career who has been a program builder, who understands what it takes to develop talent and recruit to maybe a smaller type school, who will finish out their career there and isn't looking at the next great thing. I think ultimately that's up to Nina King to decide which is the route to go for Duke.
Yeah, Curt Cignetti obviously would fit the profile of the latter there. He's 62 years old, which kind of brings me to my last thought here, Andrea. Dino Babers is 62 years old, and we're entering the world of pure speculation here right now, Andrea. You have any idea what he's going to do next? Like, I could come up and him go be like an analyst for Nick Saban, him go be, I don't know, something on Sean Lewis's staff at San Diego State, move back to Hawaii and go to the beach. I got no idea. You got any sense on what Dino's going to do next year?
No, I really don't. And, I loved getting to know Dino over the years because I just found him to be so fascinating because you could never quite predict what he was going to do, what his next move was going to be. And he liked that. He liked keeping people on their toes. I think, again, I'm just extrapolating here based on having known him for the last 8 years. I don't think it's going to sit well with him that he got fired from a job, quite frankly. When you look at the career trajectory that he has had, he hasn't really failed very many times. And he's a highly competitive person. So there's a part of me that thinks he's going to get back into it somewhere to prove either to others or to himself, like, I still know what I'm doing, right? It's never a good feeling to get fired from anything. And when you've never really been fired from something before, it makes you question a whole lot of stuff. So that's my, putting my Freud cap on and trying to dissect and figure out what's going through the mind of Dino Babers. I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up in Hawaii on a beach somewhere, but knowing how competitive he is, knowing how much he loves coaching, knowing how much he loves having an impact on the lives of the young men that he's around, I think he's going to end up somewhere eventually. Just don't know what that role will look like.
Yeah, it's one of those things. A lot of coaches, when they get fired, like they're going to have another coaching job tomorrow, and you have an idea. With Dino, man, I couldn't even begin to predict, and it will be fascinating to see what his next move is. All right, Andrea, always great to chat. Thanks so much for hopping on today.
Yep, thanks for having me. Talk to you soon.
Andrea Adelson, ESPN, talking a little Fran Brown as the next football coach. Man, like I'd go to the Dino Babers Pineapple Stand in Waikiki. Yeah, I'd do that. That'd be fun. That'd be a good trip. I don't know what he's going to do next, but I'm interested. Like it's one of those things. Like some coaches get fired. It's like, get out, good riddance. And this is one where, like, I think we could all kind of agree. Like, was it probably time? Yeah, it's probably time. But if anyone wishes him ill going forward, I don't think you get it very much when it comes to Dino and what his time was here doing. So I will wish him the best going forward. Hopefully it all works out for wherever and whatever he's doing next. With that, we'll take a break. A little 411 in the 315. Tim's in next. KSSportsTalk.com, ESPN Radio.